said, I think there's an extra spot on this afternoon. Do you want me to fill it in with a design sprint? He's like, yes, let's do it. So like anything, why not, right? So great to be. How many of you have actually done a design sprint? One. Okay. How many of you have heard of design thinking? Great. Awesome. How many of you want to do a design sprint? Great. Why don't you all stand up and let's try something. I want you to high five everyone in the room in 60 seconds or less. Ready, set, go. Everybody in the room, high five them, 60 seconds or less. Can you do it? You've high fived the camera guy. Did you high five the tech guy? I got to high five the tech guy. All right. All right, here we go. 21 seconds. Have you actually high-fived everyone? Not yet? Oh my God. Oh my God, can I high-five everyone? 30 seconds left. Are you done? What? Everybody's high-five? I have not had at least 50. I've had like 5 high-fives. Come on. There we go. Thank you. All right. 15 seconds. Everyone's sitting down. It's like, yeah, we're done. It's Friday afternoon. We're done. All right. Good. So now that's challenge number 1. Challenge number 2, in the same 60 seconds, I want you to make everyone happy in this room, okay? Go. $45 seconds left. There's free food?
Well, you already paid for it, but it feels free.
It feels free.
You're alive.
Yay! We get shirts later if you answer questions. Yeah.
If you answer questions. Does shirts make everyone happy? Does food make everyone happy?
Friday.
It's Friday. Does Friday make everyone happy? Yeah? Almost. 60 seconds are almost over. Yes. And still 5 seconds. All right. So let's think about these 2 challenges for a minute. What was the difference between the 2 challenges? You can incrementally reach the success of the high-fiving everyone in 60 seconds. What about the second one? So you said, well, you had to figure it out. Yeah. It's a little unclear, right? And you have to verify, right? So what happened when I said make everyone happy? What was your first instinctual reaction? What's the first thing you did? What? You're probably like, did you just ask that? Really? Right? It's probably like a disbelief. And then there was how am I going to do that? And then what happened? People started telling jokes. Then what happened? People started, what else did they try to do? Yes, people started experimenting. They started trying things. Hey, there's free t-shirts. Hey, there's free food. Well, you already paid for that food. But hey, the 60 seconds are almost up, right? So people started experimenting to see, might this make everyone happy? Might that make everyone happy? Now, sometimes there may have been thought around, quick thought around what it was. And oftentimes, this is how we can think about complex problem. There's kind of an answer. It's a matter of execution. Ambiguous problem, got to do a little bit more homework before you can solve the problem. And this is what is a great candidate for design thinking or a design sprint, which is essentially a time-boxed version of design thinking with probably an air of scientific method on top of it. And maybe because I'm biased, because as Magdalena said, I'm undergrad is in science. You kind of start out in this ambiguous place, and then you got to get over here. And how do you do it? How do you get there? A lot of people think it's a straight line. When I teach this to MBA students, MBA students, I won't put the squiggle up first. I'll say, all right, you're at A, you want to get to B, what happens? Straight line, right? Most MBA students really just want to go straight there, which makes sense. We have been incentivized since we were young to come up with the solution. We've been incentivized to come up with the right answer. We sit in a classroom and a teacher asks a question. What's 2 plus 2? It's 4, right? We're incentivized to have the solution, to have the answer. And design sprints are a great, and design thinking, if I think more broadly, is a great tool to allow you to say, I don't know. Let's figure this out. Because maybe some of the products and projects you're working on, nobody else has done this in the world before, so you've got to find a way to figure that out. And there's a lot of different, this is based on design thinking. There's really no magic or secret sauce here. This has been around for a while. IDEO, Explain, Chess. There's so many different frameworks that you've seen over the years. I think, Stephen, you said you worked at Frog. This may or may not be their latest version. It might be one of their older versions. But there's so many different flavors of this. They all do roughly the same thing. Identify the problem and understand it a bit. Immerse yourself in the problem. Figure out what the problem is. Come up with some solutions, and then maybe you'll test and evolve it. All right? This has been going on for a long time. Design sprints, the buzz, it may be a buzz phrase, not a buzzword, it's 2 words, maybe a buzz phrase these days, but it's actually been around for a long time. And even before Google evangelized it, I think the term may be attributed to Jake Knapp at Google Ventures, but I think there's some people who have actually been calling them that before he evangelized them. That's up for debate. But people have been doing design sprint-like structures prior to them. And so what does he mean by design sprint? And that's why I called the title of the talk, design doesn't just go faster. It doesn't make design any faster. So maybe by the end of the talk, we can figure out what sprint really means. And I think a design sprint is really a combination of 3 things. One is the design method, or design process. There's a process of design. Most of you probably know a bit about that. And it's the scientific method of inquiry, method of being rigorous and testing your hypothesis, method of experimentation. And wrap that into an agile philosophy. Agile, people over process, right? It's not about having 378 to-do items in your checklists. It's about themes and getting working software over a 20-page requirement document. So it's really the intersection of those 3 is what I think a design sprint is. And my flavor is probably different than you may have seen on Google Ventures, right? And a lot of it is to try to answer this question. How do you know your product idea is any good? What do you do today if somebody says, oh, I got this great idea for a product? What do you do? What do you do if your manager or you or someone on your team says, I got this great idea for a product? Do you just go do it? Or do you not? And I think that's ultimately this is a way to help figure this out. And the larger the challenge, oftentimes it's a good candidate for what a design sprint can be. You may have seen this years ago. Anyone here of airtime.com? You guys know who Sean Parker is? Right, one of the first investors of Facebook, founder of Napster, for those who have memories that go way back to 1999. He created this, I think it was 2010, 2011, and it didn't really go anywhere. So, I mean, there was maybe one person who said they'd heard of it. And I don't know if he did any kind of design thinking or not. He created created a solution that didn't really have a problem, at least at the time. Maybe it was ahead of his time. What's really funny is this morning somebody sent this to me because I saw one of my talks earlier and I referenced this case. It's actually trying to be coming back from the dead. And what does this actually mean? Maybe it was something that was too far ahead of its time. But it was something that didn't quite work. It didn't quite work for the market. I've heard design sprints called a number of different names. I've heard them called design spikes. The guys at Atlassian in Australia call it design spike. I've heard them called product discovery sessions, deep dives. My co-author Richard Banfield calls them deep dives. We've called them discovery sprints. Before I joined Fresh Tilled Soil, I was at Constant Context Innovation Loft. I led an innovation team for 3 years, and we called them discovery sprints, partly because it was like sprint 0 before anything would go into more of the agile scrum. And the most recent one I heard was called a design SWAT, which I thought was kind of a clever name. Think about a SWAT team. So I've heard lots of different names, and I think about where did this come from? Well, if you think back, Stanford D School's design thinking bootleg, design thinking framework was probably where a lot of this stems from. IDEO then released their design thinking for educators. Notice, again, 5 phases, 5 stages, all say very similar things. IDEO, a little bit more detail about IDEOs, but then if you start thinking about the rest of them, Google Ventures started talking about it in 2013, and then they changed some of their labels in 2015. And even their book now in 2016 has some other labels. When I was here at the Innovation Loft, that's the terminology I used with my team because that seemed to resonate with the folks in that company. And my other co-author, Trace, he works at Thoughtbot, and that's what they use at Thoughtbot, which is a design and development shop, primarily based in Boston and New York, but they have offices all over the globe. So a lot of different things, a lot of different ways to talk about it, very, very similar in their approach. And it's a tool, right? And that's all it is. It's just another tool to add in your toolbox. It's not a magic bullet either. Some people think, oh, the design sprint's going to solve everything. And no, it doesn't. It's a tool like anything, and so treat it like that. It's another tool to add to your toolbox. You don't always do a design sprint on everything. Okay? A couple resources, right? You may have seen the Google guys, and because they get the bestseller version, they're at top of the list on Amazon. But this one is actually, O'Reilly tells me that this is available in Polish. So that should be translated. I don't know about the top one, but you can find more elsewhere. You can also find Thoughtbot. If you look on GitHub, Thoughtbot has an open source design sprint repository. So you can take a look there as well. And I'll briefly cover the 5 phases, and then I'll take a pause and see if we want to dive deeper into them. So first phase, and again, the terms might change, right? But it's ultimately same thing, right? So the first phase is let's understand the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? So we do that by looking at the assumptions we have around that problem, right? What assumptions did you make when I said high five everyone in the room? What assumptions did you make when I said make everyone happy, right? And clarifying by the end of the day, you should have some clarity across your team as to what the problem is you're trying to solve. Maybe you need to bring in some subject matter experts. Maybe you need to bring in some higher level people in the organization. But ultimately, it's to crack everything open and understand what you're trying to solve for. And the second day, you're trying to come up with solutions for that problem, right? Rather than just coming up with solutions immediately, let's try to understand the problem and then come up with solutions. And it's a divergent day and called Diverge for the reason you're not trying to decide yet. You're not trying to pick which solution you're going to choose. You're just trying to expand further and further. And on the third day, that's when you actually come down and say, we're going to select 1, maybe 2 of those different ideas, and we're going to build them into a prototype to then test it on the final day. Test it with customers. All right? How many of you have heard of the spaghetti challenge or the marshmallow challenge exercise? What's the marshmallow challenge?
From spaghetti, pasta, and marshmallow, you have to do the
Tallest tower, right? So you have a couple of strands of uncooked spaghetti, some string, some tape, and within 15 minutes, yourself and a team of anywhere from 4 to 6 have to build the tallest tower and put the marshmallow on top. Now, MBAs are terrible at doing this, by the way. They're horrible. But kids are really great at it. And can you guess why children are really good at this exercise? The kids can be a little bit more creative. Any other guesses as to why children may be better at this than adults? Not afraid to fail. Smaller hands. That might help. Yeah, the other thing that kids often do is, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but kids often will build something and then try to put the marshmallow on top after, say, 7 minutes of the 15-minute exercise. So only less than half the time is over, and they're already trying to put the marshmallow on top. So they haven't even, they still got another 7 minutes to go, 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes to go, and they're already trying to see if it's on top. Where MBA students, a lot of adults, they're always waiting for that ta-da moment at the end. They wait till like minute 13 or 14 and say, okay, we think we got the tower, let's put the marshmallow on it. And what happens? It goes like this, right? So they're waiting for that ta-da moment at the end. And that's a lot of a good equivalent for designing for done or designing for perfect, right? Let's make it perfect, and let's make it perfect once. Whereas if we start testing it, we start putting the marshmallow on top, we're testing to see if it works or not, and then we can build from there. So by getting your customers in after 5 days, you're actually able to see if you're on the right track. If your solution, maybe you need to validate your problem exists and the customers have that problem in a big enough way that it's worthwhile to solve, to take out their wallet and pay you for it, right? Or maybe your solution is the right for that problem. So a number of different things you can validate or invalidate for it. You still have what, 30 minutes left? Okay. So I could stop here because ultimately this is trying to, and I said this yesterday for those who were at the talk, was this is trying to help you make things people want and not necessarily focus on making people want things. Like, oh, we have our product and you need more of our product. You need to spend more time in our product and we need more users to use our product, right? Think about where your company puts the resources. So a design sprint can help you think about trying to focus on the left-hand side, stage left, stage right, on the left-hand side of this. So I can stop here and we can talk more, maybe more discuss about design sprints, or I can go deep into, or not deep, but a little deeper into each individual phase. Which would you guys prefer? You prefer to chat a little bit more about it, or would you like me to just go from phase to phase to talk a little bit more? How chatty are you feeling this afternoon? Any questions specific? We could do more open discussion, or I can just keep talking. You keep talking. We don't want to talk. All right. All right. So I'll briefly walk through each phase. And again, the way we do this is a little bit differently than probably you've seen or read in the Google book. So like anything, you can arrive at similar conclusions, but get there in different ways. I tend to take a bit more of a scientific approach. So in the understand phase, again, it's really about calling out the assumptions and crystallizing the problem. So we spend a lot of time on the assumptions on what you think you know. How many of you have seen this 9-dot exercise, right? Where, let's connect it with 4 dots, 4 lines, and this is the comment out of the box, right? This is where the phrase out of the box came from. And this is the classic solution. You have to go out of the box, and the box is the imaginary box your brain makes. Your brain makes an assumption that you can't go out of that box. Is there another assumption around this problem that your brains make that you don't know it's making? That was the problem statement. It's 4 straight lines or less. Don't reverse the pick up the pen once you start. Don't reverse the pen. Are there other assumptions here in this problem that your brain is making? Yes, you have to go through the center. I could probably take 3 straight lines in very long, but they wouldn't go through the center. They might touch the edge, right? Like kind of the beginnings of a W, right? Very long and extended. What other assumptions are you making? Right, what if I had a really thick pen, right? And notice you're laughing, you're like, ha 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 ha, but it's an assumption your brain makes that you don't even know it makes until you stop and think about it. So these are just a few of assumptions of a simple problem. What about the complicated or more complex or ambiguous problems you guys are trying to solve with your product? How many assumptions are you and your team making? So by spending a lot of time figuring out what your assumptions are, as a team, you'll come together with a clear understanding about the problem. So that's what a lot of the first day is to focus on. And then often we'll put them in a grid and sort them, which is critical, which ones we have confidence in. And we'll come back to these later on in the sprint. But this helps us define what our problem statement is. And really, like, what are we really trying to solve for? And oftentimes you might try to think about reframing your problem. A lot of designers talk about reframing, how might we do this or how might we do that? And a very simple example I can offer is sort of an urban legend is that a shoe company sent 2 of their top sales reps to sub-Saharan Africa, and I apologize for picking on a third world country right now. First one writes back and says, there's no opportunity, nobody's wearing any shoes. Second one calls and says, there's a huge opportunity, nobody's wearing any shoes. Right? It's about how you frame the problem and how you look at it. So reframing the problem is something you want to think about that first day. So after you've got your problem, how do you then come up with solutions for it? And there's a number of ways to do this. The way that we often do is we start with a job story. Anyone here, you've heard of user stories, right? Yeah? As a user, I need to blank so that I can ... Job story adds another layer on top of that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. From there, we'll either do what's called crazy 8s or 6-ups as a way to generate multiple solutions for that job story. A job story is essentially a mini problem statement, a very crystallized problem statement, right? Let's say you have a cup of coffee, right? So you've got a cup of coffee. What job does that cup of coffee do for you? Maybe it keeps you awake. Maybe it just makes you, maybe you're cold, keeps you warm. Maybe it's just good to have something in your hand, right? Or maybe it's from a particular brand of coffee you like, and you want to be associated with that coffee brand. Maybe there's an emotional connection with a particular brand you have. If you ever go to the US, there's something called Dunkin' Donuts. My dad loves Dunkin' Donuts. It's a particular brand of coffee in the United States. He loves Dunkin' Donuts. So for him, the job it's an emotional thing for him, not just coffee. And job stories can be written in a fairly ad-lib or mad lib type of statement. So when some situation happens, I need to encapsulate some motivation so that I can achieve some kind of outcome. And that outcome doesn't necessarily always have to be an end goal. It could be just different than what it is at current state. So when I'm very tired, when I'm tired on the afternoon of a 2-day conference, I need to stay awake so that I can remember the lectures and talks that I attended, right? That's type of flow of a job story. So we'll write a bunch of these based on our problem statement, based on our journey maps, based on what we know about our users, and then we'll start trying to solve for them, doing 6-ups. And then from those 6-ups, we create storyboards. By the end of the day, we should have a whole bunch of these storyboards fleshed out as to how we could possibly solve for the problem that we came up with the day before. So you got problems identified, lots of solutions, drawn out in kind of like mini comic strips. And then we start thinking about, okay, how do we converge on this, right? Next phase is let's bring this down, because we might end the day with entire table full of these storyboards, and we can't build all 27 of them. We can only really build 1 or 2. How do we actually pull this all together? Well, remember those assumptions? We pull that back into an assumptions table. So the reason why we use those Post-its specifically is because we actually match them up on an assumptions table. So what does an assumptions table look like? Well, first, we go back to those assumptions, we rank them. Most critical to least critical. And then once we've agreed on that's the ranking of the assumptions, then we'll figure out, this is the scientific method element coming in. How do we validate or invalidate those assumptions? What's going to be, what's going to tell us if we can figure this out or not? Then how do we know if it's valid? What's the finish line for that? We've tested it. What's our criteria? And again, this is more qualitative data than quantitative data, because we're not testing with hundreds and hundreds of users. We're testing with 5, the classic 5 on Friday. Then we go back to our storyboards, and we look, and this is why we drew them on Post-it notes, and we match up the Post-it notes to the assumptions and see where do they line up. And once we've got that, we may, if we have time, we might say, is there alternative ways to do this? So we might do a little bit more ideation, maybe. But ultimately, you're trying to figure out what's of your ideas you created the day before, how do they match up to your assumptions you fleshed out on Monday? Again, getting a little bit more rigorous around the scientific method seeping in through here. This is what it might look like. This is one of the teams that I facilitated a design sprint for. And then what you'll do is you try to sketch this out. Like, all right, maybe we sketch out just a basic version of this prototype on paper. So you spend the last hour or 2 of the day just sketching it out and figuring out what it is that this needs to look like. This is before you go build anything. You're just sketching stuff out. Okay, so prototyping is the next day. I probably don't need to talk much about prototyping with you folks. But I will say that we call our prototypes for a design sprint a minimum viable concept. We don't call it a minimum viable product, because it's nothing that goes into production. We're testing something on a conceptual level, so we'll use paper prototyping, we'll use Keynote or PowerPoint. We don't necessarily, a lot of InVision or a lot of Proto.io type of prototyping is that we do. I'm sure your mileage may vary, but we never actually write, or rarely, I shouldn't say we never, we rarely write code for this, because you're building this in a day or less. And then, of course, you test it. You get it in front of the users, and you look for their behavior, right? You want to see what they do. But it isn't just ask them what they want, because I think somebody mentioned a couple times, if I just ask them what they wanted, they're going to tell me a faster horse. Now, whether Henry Ford said that, that's debatable. It's more about ask them to do something and see how they react to the prototype in front of them. Maybe you're creating a particular search and you want to create a search of a database of your company's information. So you might say, here, try and search for an article on data analytics. Watch how they do it. Watch how they navigate. And it's okay if they're just sort of clicking around and the prototype doesn't really work, but you're trying to understand their mental model And if the problem that you identified on the first day is valid, and if the solution you have for that problem is also valid. I can't stress this enough as just being as curious as possible, right? It's a very qualitative test, so it's not like you're putting it in your product and you're looking at data and how they behave or doing A/B test or ABCD test or cohort analysis or things along those lines. You have somebody, a person in front of you, a real live person, designed for people. So use that to your advantage and understand why. I've heard a few other talks have talked about the 5 whys or asking why they do this or why they do that. You really want to understand their behavior. And then once you're done, look back. What worked? What was validated of those assumptions? Were you right? Were you wrong? It's great when you realize something's actually wrong early. When I was at the Innovation Loft, one executive had an idea for a mobile app. And she was ready to put a team of 10 to 12 around this and get it in the App Store in about 3 to 4 months. She was that excited about it. And it wasn't like it was a crazy idea. It was fairly reasonable. It was based on some data that we had in the organization. It was around our support pages, the Constant Contact support pages. We had forums and videos and all these other things. And we noticed larger and larger hits, or a growing population of the users to that were viewing them on mobile devices. So the executive said, well, let's make a mobile app for this. Let's put this all repackage this into a mobile app so they don't have to look at a forum or look at here. They can get help about digital marketing quickly and easily in the palm of their hand. Sounds reasonable, had some data about it, but we said, well, wait, why don't we do a design sprint on this first? And so one of our assumptions that ended up getting incredibly invalidated very quickly was that nobody would actually go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and search for digital marketing help and look for an app. People would go to Google, or they would go to our website and search on our website. They wouldn't actually go to an app and use this. They also, most times, they were using our app when they were behind a laptop or a desktop. If they had their mobile device there, they wouldn't care. They'd open up another tab and search for the help to answer their question, and they go switch tabs and go right back into using the product. So a mobile app was a terrible idea to actually do this, which was great. We spent 4 days and we invalidated it. Now, just do some math for a minute. If we actually had 10 to 12 people for 3 to 4 months on a project to get into the App Store and nobody used it, that's a lot of money. That's expensive. People are expensive, right? So that's a great way to save some money. We learn what not to do. Thomas Edison, I think, said, I didn't fail, I just learned 10,000 ways which didn't work. Same kind of thing. So in this reflection part, you just go back to your assumptions table and notice that there's check marks or question marks. Check marks meaning, yeah, we validated this assumption. We got a positive response. This is good. Question mark, we're not quite sure. What I don't have on this one is we'll actually put a big red X if we invalidate that assumption. And some design sprints I've done have had way more red X's than they have green check marks. So we go back and look at this, and oftentimes we'll bring our senior stakeholders in the room when we go through this exercise, because then they'll see why we're making our decisions the way they are. We could play them back clips of the videos from our user tests if we need to. And then a lot of people ask me, well, what's next after your design sprint? What do you do after that? So as you think about marching down, going back to where you wanted to be earlier in this, like you might start out with your design sprint, helping you get to where you need to go. But then it's more like the lean startup, build, measure, learn, right? Refine your assumptions, build something and test those assumptions. And I would call these intervals. And then again, you're still not doing MVPs yet. You're still doing MVCs, minimum viable concept. Sorry, not model view controller for the developers in the room. And then, then after a few weeks of that, you might have a very clear idea of what your product concept needs to be. Maybe you don't have the design perfect, right? The design doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pixel perfect at all. But you've got a very good set of what the features and functionality and high-level UX need to be after just a few weeks. Then you can say, all right, goes into Agile Scrum. This is what we ultimately did at Constant Context. We called this the discovery sprint, or sprint 0. Some people call it inception. And then we do a couple of these, depending on how much more validation we needed. And then it would go into the Scrum teams. And then from Scrum, it would go into production. So that's kind of how we do it. It's another example of just a different way to look at this, right? We might do this type of thing, deploy it after whatever number of iterations we need to. This is what a week might look. But again, we start the week after the design sprint with the assumptions. What new assumptions do we have? What new assumptions do we learn on Friday? What stuff do we not have to pay attention to anymore? How do we pivot? How do we change? And it's about that, again, this is the agile philosophy part of that Venn diagram I showed earlier, is then how do you then iterate and change and continue to move forward? And so ultimately, it comes down to basically saying, hey, look, life's too short to build something nobody wants. Ash is a fellow O'Reilly author. He wrote the book, I think, Lean Analytics, or Running Lean. So that's what I got to say about design sprints. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. You can find me on Twitter, or using the hashtag design sprint, or at my email.